Imagine a hungry little boy, barefoot, standing in the rain by the side of the road. His clothes are torn, his stomach growls, and his eyes are filled with the kind of sadness no child should ever know. He is only 10 years old, but he has already lost everything, his parents, his home, and his childhood. This boy's name is Kofi, and he is an orphan. The villagers barely notice him, some even chase him away when he begs for food. But one stormy night, fate places him on a path that will change not only his life, but also the life of a powerful stranger. Kofi had grown up in hardship. After his parents died in a village epidemic, no relatives stepped forward to take him in. Instead, he wandered from house to house, doing odd jobs, fetching water, carrying firewood, cleaning yards, just to earn scraps of food. He often slept in abandoned huts, sometimes under trees, shivering through the cold nights. Yet despite his suffering, Kofi had something rare, a good heart. Whenever he found an extra piece of bread, he shared it with other hungry children. Whenever someone was in trouble, he was the first to help, even if it meant going without himself. People whispered, "That boy is too kind for his own good. Kindness doesn't fill the stomach." But Kofi didn't listen. Deep inside, he believed one truth: if I cannot give when I have little, how can I give when I have much? One rainy evening, as Kofi searched the market stalls for discarded food, he heard a cry for help in the distance. Curious, he followed the sound to the edge of the forest road. There, he saw a man lying on the ground beside an overturned cart. The man was bleeding, his leg trapped under the broken wheel. The villagers nearby hesitated. Some whispered that it was too dangerous, that robbers might be hiding in the dark. Others simply walked away, unwilling to get involved. But not Kofi. He ran forward, ignoring the rain soaking his thin clothes. "Uncle, are you okay?" the boy shouted. The man groaned, barely conscious. His face was pale, his fine clothes now covered in mud. Kofi quickly looked around. No one was coming. He realized he was the only one who could help. With all the strength his small body could gather, Kofi tried to lift the heavy cartwheel. It wouldn't budge. He pushed, he pulled, his arms shaking, but it was too heavy. Finally, with sheer determination, he used a fallen stick as a lever and managed to free the man's leg. The stranger cried out in pain, but relief filled his eyes. Thank you, boy," he whispered weakly. Kofi tore a strip from his own shirt and tied it around the man's bleeding wound. Then, without resting, he ran back to the village, shouting for help until finally a group of men came with a cart to carry the injured stranger away. Before he was taken away, the man grabbed Kofi's hand tightly. His voice was faint but filled with emotion. "Boy, you saved my life tonight. I will never forget this. One day, if the heavens allow, I will repay you." Kofi smiled shyly, not expecting much. To him, helping had been natural. He didn't do it for reward. But those words planted a seed, a promise made under the stormy night sky. Little did he know, that seed would take 20 long years to grow, and when it did, it would transform his entire destiny. After the stormy night when Kofi saved the stranger, life did not suddenly become easier for him. The man had been carried away to a distant town for treatment, and Kofi never heard from him again. Some villagers even doubted that the man was important at all. To them, it was just another wandering trader who had an accident. But for Kofi, that night left a mark. It showed him that courage could live even in the smallest, weakest body. And it deepened his belief, helping others is never wasted. The days that followed were hard. Kofi continued his endless search for food and work. In the mornings, he went to the market hoping to sweep stalls in exchange for leftover fruits. Sometimes kind women gave him bruised bananas or cassava peels. Other times, he was chased away with harsh words. At noon, when the sun was merciless, he fetched water for families, carrying heavy jerrycans on his fragile shoulders. His small frame bent under the weight, but he refused to complain. At night, he often fell asleep hungry, listening to his stomach rumble. The children of the village mocked him. "Beggar boy," they shouted. "Orphan. Nobody wants you." Kofi swallowed the pain in silence. Deep inside, he told himself, "One day, I will rise. One day, this suffering will not be in vain." Not everyone was cruel. An elderly woman named Mama Efua, who sold firewood, sometimes called Kofi to her hut. She gave him bowls of hot porridge when she had extra. She even let him sleep on her porch when the rains were too heavy. "You have a good heart, Kofi," she would say, brushing his hair with her wrinkled hands. "The world may be unkind now, but the heavens are watching." Kofi held on to those words as tightly as he held on to life itself. They were his only comfort. Despite his struggles, Kofi had dreams. He often sat by the river, watching children with parents play and laugh. In those quiet moments, he dreamed of becoming educated, of wearing clean clothes, of sitting in an office as a man of importance. But reality was harsh. School required fees, and he had none. Books cost money, and he could barely feed himself. Still, he collected discarded paper from the market and tried to copy the letters he saw on shop signs. He taught himself to read small words, though many laughed when they caught him scribbling in the dust with a stick. "Books won't fill your stomach," they jeered. But Kofi whispered back to himself, "Knowledge is food for tomorrow." Years passed, and Kofi grew from a boy into a thin, wiry teenager. At 16, life tested him harder than ever. One particularly harsh rainy season destroyed crops, and famine spread across the region. Food became scarce, and even the villagers who once gave him scraps had nothing left to share. Kofi wandered further into the forests, searching for wild fruits and roots. Many nights, he went to sleep weak and dizzy from hunger. Some days, he thought he would die. But something inside him refused to give up. He remembered the stranger's words on that stormy night. "I will never forget this. One day, if the heavens allow, I will repay you." Those words were like fire in his chest. Even if the man never returned, Kofi used that memory as strength. It reminded him that his life mattered, that his actions had meaning. When the famine ended, Kofi began searching for steadier work. He traveled to nearby towns, offering to carry loads in the market or wash dishes at roadside food stalls. Slowly, he saved a few coins. Not much, but enough to buy better clothes and some soap to wash them. For the first time in years, he looked at his reflection in a pool of water and smiled. He no longer looked like a ragged beggar, just a poor young man trying to survive. One day, while working at a food stall, a traveling merchant noticed Kofi's diligence. "Boy, you work hard," the man said. "Would you like to join me on the road? I need someone to help load my goods." Kofi eagerly agreed. For months, he traveled with the merchant, learning about trade, bargaining, and different towns. Though the pay was small, the knowledge was priceless. Even as Kofi's life improved little by little, one question haunted him: what happened to the stranger I saved? Sometimes, when he lay under the stars at night, he imagined the man recovering, returning to his family, maybe forgetting about the poor orphan who had risked everything to help. Other times, he imagined the man searching for him, only to be unable to find him in the vastness of the world. But as years rolled into decades, the memory faded like an old scar. Kofi became a man in his 30s, working as a laborer and trader's assistant. He was respected for his honesty, but he was still poor. He never married, fearing he could not provide for a family. Life had given him survival, but not yet destiny. One morning, while unloading sacks of grain at a bustling city market, Kofi heard the sound of horns and saw a convoy of sleek black cars passing by. People rushed to the roadside, waving and cheering. "Who is that?" Kofi asked another worker. "That is Chief Kwame Adu," the man replied in awe. "One of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the region. He owns estates, businesses, and even has the ear of government." Kofi's heart skipped. The name sounded familiar. He stared at the convoy, something tugging at his memory. But the cars passed quickly, leaving only dust in their wake. Little did Kofi know, fate was bringing the promise of 20 years ago back into his life. The city market buzzed with noise. Traders shouted prices, buyers haggled fiercely, and children ran between stalls carrying baskets. Kofi wiped the sweat from his forehead as he lifted another heavy sack of rice. His back ached, but he worked with steady patience. He did not notice that the convoy of black cars had stopped nearby. Nor did he see the tall man in a fine white agbada step out, followed by assistants and guards. All he heard was a voice, deep, commanding, but strangely familiar. "Careful with those sacks. Handle them with respect, for food is life." Kofi froze. His mind traveled back 20 years to that stormy night, to the man bleeding by the roadside who had spoken in the same calm, deep tone. Could it be? The wealthy man walked through the market, greeting vendors with warm handshakes. People bowed, calling him Chief Kwame Adu. He had grown older, his hair touched with gray, but his face carried the same features Kofi remembered, the strong jaw, the piercing eyes, the calm authority. Kofi's heart pounded. He wanted to run forward, to shout, "Do you remember me? I saved you." But fear held him back. What if he was wrong? What if the great chief had long forgotten a starving boy from the past? He turned away, trying to focus on his work. As fate would have it, the chief's convoy stopped right where Kofi was unloading goods. One of the sacks tore open, spilling grains across the dusty ground. The other workers cursed and stepped back. Kofi quickly knelt down, scooping the grains back into the sack. The chief noticed his diligence and paused. "You there," the chief said gently, "what is your name?" Kofi lifted his head slowly. His voice trembled. My name is Kofi, sir." The chief stared at him, frowning as if trying to recall something. "Kofi," he repeated softly. For a moment, their eyes locked, and in that instant, memories from 20 years ago came rushing back to both men. The storm, the overturned cart, the boy with torn clothes who refused to abandon him. "It can't be," the chief whispered. "Are you, the boy who saved my life?"
Kofi's throat tightened. He wanted to deny it, but tears welled in his eyes. Slowly, he nodded. "Yes, Chief. I was only a child then. But I remember. You were trapped under the cart. You promised you would never forget me." Gasps rose from the workers nearby. They glanced between Kofi, the poor laborer, and the wealthy chief who stood in shock. The chief stepped forward and placed both hands on Kofi's shoulders. His voice shook. 20 years. I searched for you, boy. I sent messengers to villages, I asked about a child who saved me, but no one knew. I thought I would never find you again. And here you are, right before me. Kofi dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. I never expected to see you again, sir. I was just glad you survived. The chief raised him up firmly. No, Kofi. Stand. You are no beggar. You are my brother in destiny. The chief turned to his guards. Bring him with us. Kofi panicked. But sir, I still have work. If I leave, I will lose my wages. The chief smiled warmly. Do not worry. From this day, your wages are mine to pay, and far more than you can imagine. The other workers watched in stunned silence as Kofi was escorted into the chief's luxurious car. For the first time in his life, he sat on soft leather seats, the air cool with scented breeze. His heart raced with disbelief. The convoy drove through the city, past tall buildings and gated estates, until they reached a grand mansion surrounded by lush gardens. Kofi's eyes widened. He had never seen such wealth up close. Inside the mansion, the chief ordered a feast. Plates of rice, grilled meat, fruits, and steaming stews were placed before Kofi. He hesitated and used to such abundance. Eat, my son, the chief urged. You have known hunger long enough. Tonight, you will know fullness. Kofi ate slowly at first, then hungrily, tears streaming down his face. Every bite tasted like a dream. When he was done, the chief leaned forward. His eyes glistened with sincerity. Kofi, I am alive today because of you. You risked your life for a stranger when no one else would. And I promised I would repay you. That promise has guided me all these years. The chief stood and spread his arms. From this day, you will never be poor again. My home is your home. My family is your family. You will work with me, not as a servant, but as a partner. I will give you education, training, and land. You saved my life, now I will give you a new life. Kofi's knees weakened. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Chief. I am not worthy. I am just a poor orphan. The chief interrupted firmly. No, Kofi. You are not just an orphan. You are the boy who proved that kindness is stronger than fear, that humanity is more valuable than gold. If anyone is worthy, it is you. That night, Kofi was given a clean room, new clothes, and a bed softer than clouds. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His mind replayed the years of hunger, mockery, and pain. And now, this miracle. He whispered into the darkness. Mama Efua was right. The heavens were watching. The boy who had once been called beggar was no longer alone. His life was about to be rewritten by the very man whose life he had saved 2 decades earlier. The next morning, Kofi woke up in a soft bed for the first time in his life. Sunlight streamed through silk curtains, and birds chirped in the garden. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. But when he looked down at the clean clothes folded neatly beside him, he realized it was real. A servant knocked gently. Breakfast is ready, sir. Sir. No one had ever addressed him like that. Kofi's throat tightened with emotion. At breakfast, Chief Kwame Adu greeted him warmly. Kofi, today begins your new journey. I will keep my promise, I will give you education and purpose. Kofi bowed his head. But Chief, I cannot read or write well. I have only scraps of knowledge. The chief smiled. That will change. You will study, learn business, and sit with wise men. I will teach you everything I know. And so it began. Kofi was enrolled in private lessons. At first, it was hard, letters danced on the page, numbers confused him, and other students whispered behind his back. An old laborer trying to learn like a child, they mocked. But Kofi did not give up. Every night, he stayed awake, practicing by candlelight, his lips moving silently as he sounded out words. Slowly, the letters formed meaning, and the numbers began to add up. Within months, he surprised his teachers with his hunger to learn. This man is different, they said. He studies not just for grades, but for life. When Kofi mastered the basics, the chief took him to his companies. He introduced him as my son in destiny. At board meetings, executives raised their eyebrows. This poor man? What can he contribute? They whispered. But the chief silenced them. Do not judge him by his past. Judge him by his heart. Kofi watched, listened, and asked questions. He learned how trade worked, how contracts were signed, how decisions shaped fortunes. His mind, sharpened by years of survival, absorbed knowledge like dry soil soaking up rain. Soon, he began to see opportunities others ignored, small markets, forgotten villages, simple solutions that could turn into profit. Not everyone welcomed Kofi's rise. Some of the chief's relatives and business partners grew jealous. One cousin confronted him. You came from nothing. Do not think you can take our place. Remember, you are only here because of the chief's pity. Kofi's heart ached, but he replied calmly, I did not come to take anyone's place. I came to honor the promise of kindness. The chief saved me as much as I saved him. The chief overheard and smiled with pride. That humility, Kofi, is why you will go further than they ever will. 1 year later, the chief entrusted Kofi with his first project, managing a small cocoa farm that had been losing money for years. Many thought he would fail. But Kofi remembered his childhood in the village, where farmers struggled with old tools and poor methods. He spoke with them, not as a boss, but as a brother. He worked beside them in the fields, earning their trust. Together, they introduced new techniques, improved storage, and found fairer buyers. Within a season, the farm turned profitable. The workers praised him, and word spread, the orphan boy had become a leader. At a grand celebration, the chief raised a toast. "Today, I am proud. Kofi has not only repaid me, but he has repaid the heavens. He turned loss into gain, despair into hope. This is just the beginning." The crowd cheered, and for the first time, Kofi felt the warmth of respect, not pity, not mockery, but genuine honor. He whispered to himself, "This is the life I dreamed of by the river when I was a boy. But it is not only for me, it must be for others too." Despite his new wealth and status, Kofi never forgot where he came from. He often visited poor villages, speaking with orphans, giving them food, books, and encouragement. One day, he returned to his old village. Many who had mocked him were now astonished. Children ran after his car shouting, "It's Kofi. The orphan is now a great man." He searched for Mama Efua, the old woman who had once fed him porridge. She was frail now, her hut barely standing. Kofi knelt before her, tears in his eyes. "Mama, your kindness kept me alive when no one else cared. From today, you will live in comfort." He built her a new house and provided for her needs until her last days. Years passed, and Kofi grew into a respected businessman and philanthropist. The chief often looked at him with fatherly pride. "Kofi," he said one evening, "you were once a boy with nothing. Now you are a man with everything, but you have kept your humility. You remind me that wealth is not counted by gold, but by the lives we touch." Kofi bowed deeply. "Chief, you gave me more than wealth. You gave me dignity. Without you, I would still be in the dust. I owe you everything." The chief shook his head gently. "No, my son. You owe me nothing. It is I who owe you. Without your courage that night, I would not be here. This is the balance of life." Kofi's journey was far from over. With each passing year, he expanded his ventures, created jobs, and mentored young men and women who came from poverty. People called him the orphan who became a king without a crown. But deep inside, Kofi never forgot the night of the storm, the bleeding man, the promise whispered in pain. That moment had planted the seed of his destiny, and now it bore fruit for all to see. Years passed, and Kofi's name became known far and wide, not for his riches, but for his compassion. He built schools for orphans, hospitals for the poor, and farms that gave work to the hungry. People whispered, "He remembers where he came from." One evening, as the sun dipped low, Chief Kwame Adu sat with Kofi in the garden. His hair was fully gray now, his steps slower, but his eyes still shone with pride. "My son," the chief said softly, "I have wealth, but you have something greater. You carry the heart of the people. When I am gone, it is you who must continue this work." Kofi bowed his head, tears filling his eyes. "Chief, I am only who I am because of you. You kept your promise. You changed my destiny." The chief smiled faintly. "No, Kofi. Destiny was always inside you. I only gave it room to grow." When the chief passed peacefully weeks later, the entire region mourned. But alongside their grief, they saw hope, because Kofi stood ready to carry the torch. And so, the orphan boy who once begged for scraps became a father to thousands. His story spread beyond villages, beyond cities, across generations. Kofi's life teaches us that one act of kindness can change everything. A starving child saved a stranger. A grateful man kept his promise. Together, they proved that compassion outlives poverty, and gratitude outshines time. So the question remains. Backhand index pointing right, what act of kindness will you choose today?